Hello and welcome to this webinar. We're delighted to be here to discuss water resources for islands and the road to next week's UN Water Conference 2023. If you're already familiar with Island Innovation, you might already know, my name is James Ellsmore. I am the CEO of Island Innovation, and we're an international network and content platform on sustainable development for islands, and an agency specializing in services for organizations working in this sector. And of course, water being one of the key sectors that we discussed that really impacts islands. We found that in the lead up to next week's event, island issues and the issues specific to island nations and island regions were not necessarily given the attention that they should. Just while we get started, you should see a poll in front of you. It would be great to see where people are joining from, and feel free also to go ahead and say in the chat. I can see the Netherlands, Fiji, Curacao, Kiribati, St. Lucia, Comoros, Faroe Islands, many more, India. It's late for some of you, so thanks for being here in New Zealand. Great to see the range of people joining and the level of interest that was made for this event. Tonga, Italy, fantastic. We have a really special lineup, as you've hopefully seen already, for this panel, touching various corners of the world, and they will hopefully be able to give us some very specific insight into the local issues faced in each of those areas. I'll just go ahead and share the poll results quickly before I introduce our moderator. So we have an interesting mixture, about a third from Europe, a third from the Caribbean, others, and a lot of you in the Pacific. Thanks for being here early. And an interesting range, 37% from the private sector, 20% from government, 25% from NGOs, and also 12% from academia. People working in a wide variety of sectors. Would encourage you to keep going ahead and posting your comments and ideas in the chat. We also have a Q&A box where you can go ahead and ask any questions, and our moderator will be able to answer those in the discussion at the end. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Aaron Salzberg. He's the former Special Coordinator for Water Resources at the US Department of State and the Director of the Water Institute at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who we've had the pleasure of working with. So Aaron, thank you very much for joining, and over to you.
No, James, thank you for inviting me. What a great honor to be able to host this panel today. I think, first of all, many of you probably know next week's discussions will be the first time within the UN in about 50 years where governments will meet at head of delegation, head of state level to discuss actions to accelerate efforts to achieve SDG 6. And that's the water and sanitation sustainable development goal. This isn't a traditional UN meeting. There won't be a negotiated outcome. Instead, the main product will actually be a collection of commitments called the Water Action Agenda. And this agenda will include new commitments, old commitments that will be enhanced or scaled up, or new partnerships that will address one of the 5 key themes of the conference. And those themes, for those of you who aren't following the UN process, are water and health, water for sustainable development, water for climate resilience and the environment, water for cooperation, and advancing the water action decade. At many of these events, and I'm an old hand within the UN system, but a lot of folks on the line probably aren't, but at a lot of these events, the special needs of the island communities often don't get the attention that they deserve. Islands are unique in their vulnerability to the impacts of water insecurity and climate change, and often face significant limitations on how they can respond. So it's wonderful that we have this time today to talk through some of these issues and to explore innovative solutions to water challenges facing the islands. We're very fortunate to have several experts to guide us through this discussion. If you guys can turn on your cameras. So perhaps what we'll do is start with a quick round of introductions. Then we'll ask each one of our panelists to deliver short remarks, and then we'll go on to the discussion. And for those of you listening, again, as James mentioned, you can provide questions in the Q&A function. Maybe just a quick round of introductions. Jason, why don't we start with you? If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, hello, good afternoon to all. My name is Jason Ennis. I'm from the island of St. Lucia, and it's a pleasure for me to be here representing for all of you at the moment.
Thank you, Jason, for joining us. Anna Teresa.
Hi everyone, my name is Anne-Teresa Birthright. I'm from Jamaica. I am a Science, Technology and Policy Fellow at the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research. Thank you.
Great. Alvin.
Hi everyone, good morning from Sydney, and Bula Vinaka to everyone from Fiji. I'm a research scientist at the University of Newcastle at the Center of a Global Center of Environmental Remediation. My expertise is in water resource management, groundwater modeling, and decision making. And I'm also a part-time academic, and I normally teach courses related to hydrology, coastal engineering, and water resource management. Thank you, and looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, thanks, Alvin. Rihanna.
Hi everyone, my name is Rihanna Gonzalez. I am from Trinidad and Tobago, but right now in cool Sweden, kind of missing home right now. I am a water resources specialist at Global Water Partnership. So
Great.
speak to you
Thank
soon.
you. Uliva.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Oliva Eidesgaard from the Faroe Islands. I'm a geologist working at the Faroes Geological Survey and have been working with the groundwater issues these last years.
Great. And Ruth.
Howdy, everybody. It's Ruth Cross here, and I am based right here in beautiful Kiribati. In recent years, I've held numerous consultancy positions in the development sector to address challenges in Kiribati relating to economic empowerment, adaptation and mitigation efforts in climate change, sanitation, healthcare, education and business. And this morning, I'm here in my capacity as the in-country team lead for SPREP on a water security project.
Oh, great.
Thank
you.
you.
Ruth. Okay. Why don't we start with Jason? Jason, what do you see as some of the key issues facing the island communities, and what are some of the potential responses that we might want to highlight and focus on next week?
Okay. Am I going straight into the presentation?
Please go ahead, Jason.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Do I have permission to share?
You should be good to go.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, just hold on 1 second. Okay. I'm not seeing my screen.
Thank you, everyone. And just to remind you, again, you can put questions into the Q&A, and as we get towards the end, we'll go back to a question and answer section. So. You go and yeah, perfect. Jason, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon to all. My name is Jason Ernest. I'm from the island of St. Lucia, like I said. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Okay. Okay. Yes, so the island of St. Lucia is located in the Eastern Caribbean between Martinique to the north and St. Lucia to the south. The island, we boast a driving volcano. I'm sorry, I seem to be having some issues with my presentation.
We're sharing it on our side, so if you just go ahead and tell us when to move the next slide, we should be able to move forward like that.
Okay. Okay, I was hoping to share it on my end. Okay, but yes, you could go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, so we boast a driving volcano, twin peaks called Lapito. Next slide. We also have 2 Nobel Prize winners. Sir Arthur Lewis for economics and also Derek Walcott for literature. World Water Day is celebrated during the height of the dry season here in St. Lucia, and it is quite fitting to remind the public on the need to conserve and manage water. Next slide, please. The island is 616 square kilometers, and we consist of 37 watersheds. The largest watershed is 48 kilometers. Our country is very mountainous, and our highest peak is 950 meters. The importance to water supply varies from watershed to watershed. Water comes primarily from rivers and streams, with a few springs in the southwest of the island, producing satisfactory. At this time, groundwater availability is not adequately mapped and not an additional source of water commercially. There are 4 major water supply systems and dozens of minor water supply systems. Next slide, please. Yeah. In all these systems, there is only one major reservoir, the John Compton Dam. When commissioned, it had a capacity of 500 million gallons, but after Hurricane Thomas in 2010, its capacity was reduced by upwards of 60%. Next slide. A key major issue that exists in the brief overview just mentioned is one of storage. Runoff that reaches the river, practically all of it returns to the sea. In many areas, the water supply system has been shut down, and when it rains, there is irritability. This means it's raining or it has rained, and yet communities do not have water. Therefore, both in the wet and dry seasons across the island, we are always water stressed. This is a combination of the weather variability as well as water utility infrastructure. The effects of all sectors that are dependent on that water supply system is very crucial. In many cases, water is struck in to complement available supplies. Therefore, when thinking of building climate resilience in the water sector, the first thing that comes to mind is sustainable water supply. And as an agency, we've been doing our part, working with our many partners to manage the water resources. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is our case in terms of water variability. Next slide. Yes, so this is the core activity of the agency that I direct. We monitor our water resources through maintaining a network of rainfall stations, a network of water level stations, stream gauging, water quality testing, and field investigation with partner agencies. In our approach to managing the water resources, that is both volume and quality, we facilitate project interventions using our sectoral adaptation strategy and action plan as a guide. Next slide, please. So this is what we're guided by when we are undertaking facilitating projects in the water sector. So the St. Lucia sectoral adaptation strategy and action plan for the water sector is a 10-year strategy that has been designed for action to reduce water-related risk induced by climate change. It consists of over 50 measures to build resilience in the water sector. So just briefly, I'm just going to speak to 4 outcomes with some projects that are aligned to some of the strategic objectives in those outcomes. So next slide. So this is our water policy. This is the updated water policy of 2020. Our previous water policy is the National Water Policy of 2004. So we're actually updating it at this point in time to take into consideration climate change and also that the country's future is fundamentally related to the quality and conservation of the water resources and the reliability and resilience of the infrastructure services to cope with the natural disasters and climate variability. Next slide. Also, our second outcome, we're looking at promoting the sustainable use of alternate water sources, right? And at this point in time, what we're looking at is rainwater harvesting. It is not new, but it is very effective. The effects are immediate, and in St. Lucia, it rains any time of the year. Even if we have variability, it rains anytime. So we definitely looking to take
just another minute if you can. Just another minute if you can, Jason.
Say again?
If you can begin to wrap up, Jason, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. So next slide. Also, we're looking at improving facilities to reduce wastewater discharge. This is another project that is currently ongoing because this is an issue that our land-based activities are affecting our water resources. Next slide. Also looking at constructed wetlands to improve our wastewater discharge. Next slide. Also, to build resilience in our water sector, we're improving some of our water infrastructure, looking at our intakes, looking at our treatment plants, and also our storage capacity in certain areas, because these areas are key for development. So we're improving our water structure. Next slide. And as an agency, this is the future for us to collect our data to improve on our skills, where we analyze the data, we process, and we also introduce modeling into our activities in order to make decisions where we can manage risk. Next slide. Yes, so in essence, this is what we're doing under the banner of water resources, and all of this is tied to the SDGs, because we realize that we need to improve on our water services, especially if we're looking at development, and this is where we're moving. This is the direction that we're moving. Also with the SDGs, we have to report, so whatever we do, the SDGs are always in mind, and the SDGs are cross-cutting. Without water, the other SDGs, the other 16 SDGs would definitely be affected. So with that, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Jason. I'm going to hold off on any questions till we get through all the speakers, and so we'll go to Anne-Teresa next. And Jason, actually, if you've got a link to that water policy report, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. I think there's a lot of interest in that, so thank you. So Anne-Teresa.
Okay, hi, I'm trying to start my video, but I think it has, okay, thank you. Hi, everyone, hi. So glad to be here. So I'll just jump right in. So the majority of my experience has really been at the local level, really working with rural communities, particularly small scale coffee farmers. So we know, of course, Jamaica is no exception to the impacts and vulnerability of climate change on water resources and the devastating impact on rural livelihoods. I'm sorry to the audience, I don't have a presentation, I'll just be speaking, right? So though I'm not really an expert practitioner in the water sector, we know that water is a cross-cutting topic and is extremely vital for all sectors, right? Agriculture, health, tourism, energy, across the board. So for Jamaica, it has been experiencing increasingly variable rainfall, prolonged drought conditions, and saline contamination of groundwater resources, you know, all leading to increased pressure and decline in the supply and distribution of water across rural and urban landscapes. So communities have been affected by, you know, water lockups or intermittent provision of water service due to increasingly frequent dry spells and drought conditions. So our surface water resources that are usually recharged by predictable and consistent rainfall patterns have been affected. And, you know, we are dependent on more than one rainy season. So a deficiency in one rainy season can produce those knock-on effects, right? So Jamaica is even now currently experiencing drought conditions, and the government has to be allocating funds to assist with the trucking of water, particularly to rural communities. But the truth is we have been here before, right? Jamaica is no stranger to drought conditions. But the question remains, you know, why are we still in this position? And maybe, you know, other island states have those questions as well. I read an editorial last week that said drought mitigation talks are loudest in the midst of a drought, right? But to be fair, Jamaica has been engaged in several adaptation and mitigation actions at the local and national level outside of, you know, active drought conditions. So for example, we have a rainwater harvesting policy guideline that's currently being revised. We have our national water sector policy and implementation plan, which was updated in 2019, and it provides a framework for improving access to water, enhancing water use efficiency, and promoting sustainable practices in water resource management. We have a drought mitigation program. We have a drought management committee. We have a drought monitoring and early warning system, right? And even according to the recent stocktake report of adaptation actions being engaged in Jamaica from 1994 to 2019, Jamaica has actually implemented almost 150 adaptation initiatives of varying scope and size. And I'm sure that's like a conservative count, right? So these projects, they cover, improvements in the collection of meteorological data, installation of water harvesting systems, on-farm water management, interventions to conserve water consumption in households, community-based adaptation interventions, installation of drip irrigation technology, using aquifer recharge technology, looking at, building the capacities of persons on the ground through training sessions. Also, research has been active in the sector, right? Including published articles and the gray literature, looking at the impact of climate change on water availability and demand, and the analysis of stream flow in river channels, as well as flood risk, and also, incorporating modeling tools to examine stream flow trends under different climate scenarios, as well as examining groundwater contamination and aquifer vulnerability. So, going back to the article, the editorial that I mentioned earlier, the writer acknowledged that we hear of the drought mitigation plans and the projects being implemented, yet it's still somewhat difficult to really pinpoint, to any noticeable improvement in water supply or drought security measures. Oftentimes we still resort to, the status quo of, trucking water to communities as the point of reference for, alleviating our water issues. So the question is asked, what are we missing, right? Is it the funding that is needed to upscale and replicate these projects and programs? Is it the funding that is needed to implement research findings, right? How can we make these adaptation actions long-lasting and sustainable, and not only for a project cycle, right? Because if they're not being obvious or noticeable to persons on the ground, then that is a concern. So really just wrapping up, what is important is really, for me, in my opinion, is, integrating and mainstreaming adaptation initiatives in the budget of, the various sectors and the national and ministerial, budgeting processes. So really having a more proactive approach rather than reactive through short-term ad hoc interventions. Also investing in monitoring and evaluating the outputs of these interventions, right? I think it's okay to reference the failures, not only the successes or the success stories, because these are lessons learned, right? And, it's very important to recognize that climate change is more than just an environmental issue. It is a developmental problem, and we can't measure progress in resilience if we're not monitoring it, right? So that is something that we definitely need to focus on. So these are my few words. Thank you so much. You're on mute, Aaron.
Sorry, and Teresa, thank you. That was great. And you're absolutely right. The wrong time to talk about a drought is during a drought.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that point. And obviously these are, again, reinforcing this idea, these are incredibly complex environments to work in. So thank you very much. Alvin, over to you. You got it, Alvin?
Hi, Aaron. Yeah, thank you. It says I cannot start a video because the host has disabled it or something like that. You cannot.
You should be able to now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aaron. That's a lovely presentation from Jamaica. Now let's move to the Pacific Islands. As you all know, I'm based in Australia, but I'm from Fiji. So my presentation today will be all about the Pacific Islands. I would like to start by quoting the words of former UN's General Secretary Kofi Annan, who once said that access to water is a fundamental human right and therefore a basic human need. Once again, it's a pleasure for me to welcome all of you joining us from different parts of the world for this virtual event. Despite the distance that separates us, it is heartening to see that all of us can be united in our commitment to address very critical issues that affects our planet Earth. Today, I'll be talking about a very important issue to me, and I think to most of us present here today, is about water resources and climate crisis in the Pacific Island countries. As you all know, the Pacific Island countries are some of the most vulnerable nations in the world when it comes to the impacts of climate change. Rising sea levels, increased frequency of natural disasters, and changing weather patterns are just a few examples of these challenges affecting these island nations. One of the most critical issues related to climate change in the Pacific is the availability and quality of water resources. Water is a precious resource, and without access to clean water, these nations face an uncertain future. Many of the Pacific Island countries are already facing water shortages, and climate change is worsening this problem. With the sea levels rising, saltwater intrusion into freshwater sources has become a significant issue, rendering many sources of water unusable. Furthermore, the changing weather patterns caused by climate change have resulted in more frequent and intense storms, leading to floods and landslides. These disasters cause significant damage to water infrastructure, leaving communities without access to clean water for extended periods. In some cases in the Pacific, it takes months to restore water supplies after a severe storm or a flood, putting the health and well-being of communities at risk. As a research scientist myself, I believe in quantitative data, and I only rely on facts. So I'll be going to mention some important facts regarding the water crisis in the Pacific Island countries. Over 2 million people in the Pacific Island lack access to safe drinking water. That was by Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. In Kiribati, a low-lying island nation, 50% of the population lack access to safe drinking water. That's from the World Health Organization. In Fiji, approximately 26% of the population lack access to improved water sources. That's from the World Bank. In Tuvalu, a small island nation, more than 70% of households rely on rainwater harvesting for their water supply. That's from United Nations. In the Solomon Islands, only 19% of the population has access to improved sanitation facilities. That's again from the World Bank. The water sector in the Pacific Island requires an estimated $1.2 billion in investment to meet the water-related sustainable development goals. That's from the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. These are just a few water resource crisis facts from Pacific Island countries. It is clear that urgent action is needed to address these issues and ensure that all the people in the region have access to safe and reliable water supply. In response to this changing climate and the challenges we face, Pacific Island countries have implemented several measures to conserve and manage their water resources. These measures include rainwater harvesting, water storage, and construction of water treatment facilities. However, many of these measures require significant financial resources and technical expertise, which is often lacking in these island nations. The international community must step up its support to help these countries tackle the water crisis caused by climate change. As we prepare for the UN Water Conference 2023, we must recognize that access to clean water is not a privilege, but a fundamental human right. We must work together to develop sustainable solutions that prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable and marginalized communities. We must also ensure that we are not intensifying existing inequalities in our efforts to improve access to clean water. As an active researcher, I have already started using some of my expertise and skills to develop tools, methodologies, and solutions that help Pacific Islanders to better manage their fragile water resources. I specialize in using groundwater numerical models and predictive analytics as valuable tools to address water resource management challenges in the Pacific Island countries. As you might be aware, groundwater numerical models are computer-based tools that simulate the behavior of groundwater systems. These models are used to assess the availability and quality of groundwater resources, identify potential sources of contamination, and evaluate the impacts of climate change. Predictive analytics, on the other hand, is a data-driven approach to forecasting future trends and outcomes. Combining my groundwater numerical and predictive analytics expertise, I provide decision makers with powerful insights into the complex dynamics of water resources in island countries. By using these tools together, decision makers develop more accurate and robust water management plans and that takes into account both the current and future conditions. This helps in ensuring sustainable and equitable use of water resources, even in the face of changing and uncertain climate conditions. The upcoming UN Water Conference 2023 provides an opportunity for us to come together as a global community to share knowledge, exchange ideas, and develop strategies that will help us achieve our common goal of ensuring access to clean water for all. Let us use this opportunity to build bridges, forge partnerships, and foster a spirit of cooperation that will enable us to make real progress towards this critical goal. I encourage you all to actively participate in this discussion, ask questions, and share your experiences and knowledge with us. Together, let us work towards creating a world where access to clean water is not a luxury, but a fundamental human right. In conclusion, the water crisis in the Pacific Island countries is a critical issue that requires immediate attention from the international community. Climate change is intensifying the already dire situation, and without action, the health and well-being of millions of people in the region is at risk. We must work together to support these nations in managing their water resources, adapting to the changing climate, and building resilience against future disasters. Once again, thank you all for joining us today, and I'm confident that together we can create a more sustainable and resilient future for generations to come. Thank you.
No, thank you, Alvin. You're clearly ready for the UN. And thanks for bringing us down to the personal level and giving us a sense of the numbers that we're talking about in terms of the proportion of people who lack access to these basic services. These are very important things for us to remember. Rihanna, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Alvin. I learned quite a lot from you. So I'm just gonna start directly and share my screen. I hope everyone is seeing. Yes? Yes?
Yes, you're fine. Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yes, so thank you again. Happy to be on this panel. Just a little bit of context about me, because I always think it's important to know why we do what we do. And so just to say, I am from a small island, Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, but I'm currently living in Sweden. I have a background in marine biology and I love the beach. But most of my career, I have been working in watershed management, actually 10 years with a utility in Trinidad and Tobago. But while I was in Trinidad, I have been an active participant for youth engagement and representation of young people in the UN processes, in policy development, especially for environmental conservation. So I've had the privilege to represent my country as well as the region on the global stage. But at these events, I was usually either the only young female Caribbean representative in the room. And this is where I wanted this to change, because I know everyone previously spoke on the issues and challenges in the islands, but we also have to look about representation at the global level at different regional stages. And young people make up right now, under 30, make up about half of the population of the planet. So having youth represented in these spaces is my main goal at this point in time. And at GWP, the Global Water Partnership, where I'm currently working, that is one of my roles to ensure youth empowerment and leadership when it comes to water policy and governance. So if you don't know about Global Water Partnership, I won't go too much into it, but it is an international organization dedicated to strengthening water management and governance worldwide. We are located in 13 different regions with 65 countries, and it's a partner network. So our focus is water. So the upcoming water conference is a major event in our calendar. And I will go a little bit into this conference, but try not to repeat what Aaron said at the beginning. So the UN conference is said to be a big watershed moment. And as it was said before, unlike climate, biodiversity, and other conferences that are happening, different COPs, there's no conference of parties or dedicated convention for water. So the last conference on water was 47 years ago. And honestly, if it was not for climate change, water may have never actually been given this center stage. So it's quite an important stage that water is getting right now. So as mentioned before, there are 5 thematic dialogues: water for health, water for development, water for climate, water for cooperation, and a 5th on the water action decade. These dialogues will make up what is called the water action agenda. And this is, as mentioned before, is one of the main outcomes of the UN 2023 conference. And it has to do with, it is a collection of water-related voluntary commitments. So it is the member states who have, and other stakeholders that can commit to different activities that will address global water challenges. And these commitments are meant to be action-oriented, inclusive, and cross-sectoral. So I will just want to focus on one of the commitments that GWP will be adding to this agenda, which will be focused on youth representation and building their capacity in the water and governance field. So we launched the GWP Water Academy for Youth in 2021, called the GWP Way. And it is meant to take young people on a journey from learning to leading. So accelerating their participation for the implementation of the SDGs. And this is where the reason why we were focused on youth, because as I mentioned before, half of the population of the planet are under 30, and it's estimated that by 2030, it will be 57%. And out of this, only 2.6% of parliamentarians are also under 30. So who is actually representing this huge proportion of our population that will be the future leaders of the world? So we have created this program to nurture, catalyze, and accelerate the influence that young people have by exposing them to new opportunities, skill sets, mentors, etc., to build their confidence and motivation to become change makers in their communities and their countries, where it moves from the traditional lecture-based learning and it moves more towards a collaborative and immersive learning experience. So far, we've held 5 academies in 5 regions, and I was just highlighting the one in the Caribbean and in Southeast Asia. So the program in the Caribbean, each of them focused on something different, but it highlighted all the different water issues that occur in these different regions. So the Caribbean versus Southeast Asia. And in the Caribbean, they focused on projects that youth will want to execute and build their capacity in executing these, and also had opportunities for young leaders to move forward. While in Southeast Asia, there was more about mentorship, learning about the integrated water resources management, disaster preparedness, and source to sea. So they had a lot of mentors from ADB, from WMO, and all these different organizations to build that relationship and learning experience. So, and that was just the academy. And I think, I don't know how much time I have left, but this is just to highlight a campaign that is happening towards the conference, the Global Youth Movement for Water, which is called Filling Up the Glass, that we are pushing forward. And it has 5 demands for the conference, focusing on the different dialogues. In terms of health.
You should wrap up if you can, Rihanna.
Yes, this is the last slide. So this is for access to water, for help, dedicated funding for youth, dedicated adequate education in climate, for cooperation, different mechanisms and negotiations for youth to be included. And finally, that there will be a dedicated youth envoy for water for any conferences coming up. So thank you so much. I'm not gonna do that video, but GWP will be at the conference and I can share the link to the different events that we'll be hosting. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Rihanna. And I really appreciate your voice on this. The fact is, I'm ready to step aside. We need the youth engaged in a much greater way, and we need your new ideas. We need your passion to bring into these environments and fora. And so please push us aside. Your time has come. So
thank you so much.
No, thank you for the comments. Ulva, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I was sharing my screen. Okay. Again, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. This has been a really interesting and really a new experience to me to hear all of these presentations. I'm now going to bring you up maybe into another part of the world. We're going to the Faroe Islands. And as I said in the introduction, I'm a geologist. So I'm coming from that background, and for us, or for me at the moment, it's groundwater. That's where the focus is. So first, just an introduction to the Faroe Islands. We are located between Iceland, Scotland, and Norway, or the Shetland Islands and Norway, in the northwestern part of the North Atlantic. The area of the Faroe Islands is 1,400 square kilometers, but including the sea area, we are around almost 300,000 square kilometers. And the Faroes is comprised by 18 islands. It's 18 basaltic islands. And we do have 29 municipalities divided around these islands. It's quite steep islands, so in average, the islands are 300 meters above sea level. And our highest mountain is Slattratindur, which is 882 meters. In the Faroes, you're never more than 5 kilometers away from the ocean. And in the Faroes, it rains a lot. So we do have a lot of water here. And the annual precipitation is an average between 2,000 and 4,000 millimeters. The water supply for drinking water and industry is 98% surface water, while we use 2% of spring and groundwater. The Faroe Islands is self-governed, but we are within the Kingdom of Denmark. We're not a member of the EU, and we are governed by what we call a Løgting. It has 33 members, and we have a Løgman, which is our prime minister. The number of inhabitants in the Faroes is around 54,000 people, and the capital is called Tórshavn, and around 20,000 people live in Tórshavn. So water issues, in concerns to water issues in the Faroes, this is a relatively new, I would say, something that it's an issue that we have quite relatively found out. So we do have, of course, we do have some of these. We have water scarcity, for example, during summertime, despite the high amount of precipitation. And also some villages have difficulties getting access to clean water, and actually in some of these villages throughout the whole year. Approximately, this maybe affects around 10,000 people of the inhabitants in the Faroes, which is quite a large percentage, thinking about the number of inhabitants. And we do face a growing industry at the moment. So in the Faroes, it's mainly a salmon, which is using a lot of fresh water, and this industry is growing at the moment. So this is something that we would like to be upfront and start knowing about the issues that we might get in this area. So what has happened the last 10 years or so is that we have started a new energy source for heating houses. And we have drilled a lot of shallow geothermal wells. And during these wells, we have been drilling around 1,500 or so until now. We actually found out that we do have a lot of groundwater, which we haven't really been aware of all the groundwater in the basalts. But we know that now, and we've started mapping these, so we're getting a better picture of the whereabouts of the groundwater in the Faroes. But while we've been doing this, we've also found out that we do lack regulations in like the big picture, and this is something that we need to do something about. So actually, we have been preparing, and we are still in the preparation part of a groundwater, or actually a freshwater and islands congress, which we're going to launch together with IWRA in the Faroe Islands next year in September. This is hopefully going to be a biannual congress, and starting off in the Faroes next year. And what we're going to discuss during this Congress is that we will discuss freshwater-related opportunities and challenges facing islands around the whole world. But we will, or at this point next year, we will be focusing on a special topic, which we have agreed together with the IWRA from the Faroe side. And the first focus points will be administration and collaboration and innovation. And this is something that we have discussed among ourselves here in the Faroes, and we have gotten to the conclusions that these are the main focus areas for us to begin with. And the topic will hopefully also be of interest and useful for water professionals working around in the islands, and also for the SIDS in particular. We're aiming at also to include arts, culture, and the younger island generations. And if anybody has further questions on this Congress, you're welcome to contact us at the email address listed here on this slide. And that was basically it from me here from the Faroes. Thank you very much for listening.
Ulva, thank you very much. I think your pictures have convinced all of us that we need to come visit. It looks like an amazing place. And I think it just, reminds us how important these just ecosystems and environments are, how unique they are, and how important it is for us to work to protect them. So I really appreciate you communicating that through pictures. It was really, really well done. Ruth, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Yes, chiming in. Kamna benini Maori, everybody. It's Ruth here from Kiribati. Usually we like the Kiwis or the Maoris from New Zealand, we usually start with a greeting of a blessing, but I'll let you all off the hook on saying it back to me. Kamna benini Maori. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Alvin for his really fantastic, comprehensive overview of what's happening in the Pacific region. We usually call Fiji our older brother or sister, and I think that was really demonstrated really well by Alvin's, overview of what's happening in the region and the impact on the Pacific Islands. So to complement his, his summary, I'll be actually taking you into Kiribati and showing you, what it looks like, the impacts of climate change for the region and what we're doing for water security. So with Kiribati, where are we? I like to call our country the world's best kept secret because usually no one knows we exist. And this is where we are, right in the middle of the Pacific, where the international dateline and the equator intersect. Now, we, because of where we're placed, right where at that intersection, we actually sit in all four hemispheres, and we're right on the international dateline. So we're the first to see the dawn of each new day. So I like to say that time starts in Kiribati. We have 33 islands altogether, and 21 of them are inhabited. These islands are very tiny coral atolls, 1.5 meters above sea level. And the island that I live on, which is South Tarawa, is the longest one, and it's 24 kilometers long, and it's joined by causeways. Now, we're very small in terms of landmass, but we are the second largest Pacific Ocean state at 3.5 million kilometers of ocean, with Tahiti as the largest with over 5 million kilometers of ocean. So if you put all of our islands together, you'll get just over 800 square kilometers of land. Just to give you some perspective on what these islands look like, this is South Tarawa, which is where the airport is. So to give you some perspective of how wide our islands are, you can see the airport over there, which goes from one end to the other. And you can see what I mean by all the islands which have been joined for South Tarawa. They have been joined together to make that one long island. That is the most populated section. So there's a total population of 140,000 people in Kiribati, and 50,000 of those live on the main urban island, which we call the capital of Tarawa, and the rest are spread out over the 20 island atolls. Now, this is what our geology looks like. As you can see, why we say we're so vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. You can see our freshwater lens and how fragile it is. There you can see you've got the 1.5 meters above sea level, which is our islands. And then you can see the water lens right there, and you can see the brackish transitional layer underneath. What's happening for our islands is that brackish layer has actually, our freshwater lens has already been contaminated on most of those outer islands, if not all. And so we're already experiencing the saltwater intrusion into that freshwater lens. Now, the outer islands are the ones that we're really focusing on for our water security projects. So you can see from these photos is pretty much how communities are still living on the outer islands. They're still living in the traditional style homes. What you've got in the bottom corner there is what we call a man cave in Kiribati, where you can see the fishing nets and the coconuts, which is usually I guess how the men spend their time. You can also see the dera, which is the thatch that's made for, very different from man caves in other countries, I'm sure. So our islands, as you can see, when we experience tidal surges, that then goes on to contaminate the wells that we have. And when those wells are contaminated, that if we had 15 years, it would take 15 years for those wells to become clear again. But obviously, that's not what's happening, and that's obviously going on to affect our crops. With breadfruit, taro pits, and coconut trees, obviously starting to die because of not having that fresh water lens to have access to. So some areas are worse off than others. Of course, when we have these tidal surges, you can always count on the little ones to have a good time. It does cause a bit of stress on the adults, but usually when we have these tidal surges, our children and our youth tend to have a really fun time with the flooding. This doesn't happen a lot. The last time we had a really severe king tide was probably in 2018, and that was here on South Tarawa. Other islands that have experienced this are Aranulka. Now, you can see we try to build seawalls and sort of protect ourselves from the wave energy, and that's a big area of focus for us in Kiribati right now, coastal protection using soft and hard measures. But, again, when you have these, I think, as we all know, that the ocean is our friend and we do love it, but sometimes it's not our friend. And these are the types of things that can happen when we have those tidal surges. Nonetheless, we still count ourselves extremely lucky, very blessed to live in our island paradise. We're very happy here. And for the most part, we think that we're living a very idyllic life. Our community structures are very strong, and our culture is quite beautiful and unique. I like to believe that when people come here, they leave Kiribati and are never the same once they experience our way of life and the way that our communities and our people are. So I noticed that we have, people from all over the world, and I've been very blessed to be able to travel a great deal, but of course, there's no place like home. And I do still think that Kiribati is one of the most magnificent places in the world. And the project that I'm on, which is a SPREP which is an accredited entity that's working to access adaptation funds to enhance the resilience of the outer islands. For that particular project, we were looking at 3 outer island communities and looking at all the solutions that are needed in order to provide safe access to drinking water and be able to deliver it to the communities. For our outer islands, you could have anywhere from 200 people on a very small islet to around 2,000 people around a whole island that would probably be 2 or 3 kilometers long in some of them. So we have a number of different solutions that we're looking at. This is probably the most simple solution that's in place at the moment, and these are some carousel water farms which are being rolled out because these can be built at a household level or at a community level and can provide, depending on the size of the system, can provide up to, I think it was 80 litres a day. And then for the outer islands, we're looking at rolling out, well, there's a project currently in place to provide solutions for 10 outer islands. And this is the Suez solar desalination system. These systems are designed and tailor-made for the size of the community. They can produce anywhere from 5 to 25,000 litres or more. And they're based on the requirement of 25 litres per person per day. We're also, in the spirit of innovation, we're also wanting to explore other solutions, and we're also looking into the solar-powered air-to-water generators by Watergen. We know that these ones are a little bit more portable, and we consider, at a community level, island level, or even at a village level, what solutions might be best, to provide for those. I rushed through it, and that's all from me. I hope that's given you a bit of perspective, taken you or brought you over here into Kiribati to see what the impacts look like. Again, I know everybody is affected. We're affected by climate change all over the world, but certainly for countries like Kiribati, Tuvalu, and Marshall Islands, not that it's a competition that anyone wants to win, but I certainly say that we consider ourselves some of the most vulnerable communities, given that we're, our day-to-day way of living is already impacted, and obviously we're facing the possibilities of future displacement, given the type of islands that we all live on. So again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate the fact that everyone here today is committed to being part of the solution. So I want to say in Kiribati, Tamraba. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ruth. And no doubt about it, given the unique geography and topology of your islands, there's no questions that you've got a different set of challenges to deal with, and it makes you highly vulnerable. Can I invite all the other speakers to come back on screen? We've got a number of questions in the chat, but I actually want to build off one that Ruth started to address, which is some of the things that they're doing to improve access to safe water and sweet water for drinking. And I know that many of your island communities are dealing with these types of challenges. Are there other approaches that you're taking to meet drinking water needs on some of these islands in light of some of the both extreme events and the saltwater intrusion and all the other threats that you're facing? And maybe I'll just open it up to anyone who wants to weigh in. I'll look for a signal.
Yeah.
Jason, please.
Yes. So I think earlier it was said that water is a human right, a fundamental right, and one of the ways is to keep the price of water inexpensive, where it's within the reach of the most vulnerable. And what happened is that at this point in time, with the fresh water availability, this is the services that you can really keep at a reasonable price for the population. Now, if we have to go into desal, because in St. Lucia we don't have groundwater, the research that was done before says we really don't have. So if we have to move from freshwater, we have to go into desal, and that can raise, the cost of doing services, those services. So what we try to do, the alternate source that we're currently looking at is basically rainwater harvesting, because it's there and persons definitely can use it. I mean, right now, it can be made much safer compared to the past where you had, those open containers. But now on island, we have a company that's actually building the tanks on island. So the cost has gone down significantly. So this is something that we're trying to remain with our freshwater, sustain our freshwater services and remain with it for as long as possible.
Great. And, Ruth, you guys are going to air extraction, so to speak, for water generation versus desal. Do you know there was a question about the energy costs of doing that and what drove you towards that technology versus desal?
Hi, thanks for the question, Aaron. Do you know, we're still exploring this because I guess, and it's funny because we look at the cost versus, population issue, and we are in a bit of a situation that's quite unique in that you're looking at communities of only 200 people, and then you're looking at installing a desalination system that costs hundreds of thousands. And is that right if you think about the cost benefit analysis and the people versus cost? And one of the interesting thing about our political leaders, which I think is quite inspiring and wonderful, is that they go, you know what, we are all about providing what people need to be where they are. And that's all that matters versus the cost involved. For the water, do we go, air to water versus desalination versus carousel systems, which would probably be the cheapest and simplest technology? That's a question that we're constantly sort of working through, but we just look at the different types of technology that are available and then think about what funding mechanisms are available and what seems to make the most sense in those communities. And we're still working through that. It's all new terrain for us. So every project and an opportunity is different. And hopefully, and we've got 20 islands to work through. So I think maybe we get through the first 3 islands and we see what works best. And then we'll know what to do for 4, 5, 6, 15, 20, right? But we hope to get to that. And of course, we're very open to advice and thoughts. There's a lot of people that are involved in this symposium, and we're always open to advice in that area. So thank you.
That's great. And maybe turning to some of the scientists for a second. Is wastewater reuse, recycling, is that part of the solution in these environments? Is that something that we can readily implement?
Sorry, could you run that by me? I saw a comment come through and I was curious about it. I got distracted.
Yeah, no, sorry. So the question is whether or not we could also augment supplies of fresh water through water recycling, wastewater reuse, whether or not these are viable options in places like this.
We honestly are open to all kinds of solutions. And I think the simpler, the better, because we are looking at community-based solutions, especially on the outer islands, rather than whole of island solutions. So certainly open to learning more.
Great.
And considering that we do have to draw from contaminated groundwater, as in groundwater that's already brackish with saltwater intrusion, this, recycling or filtering these water supplies is probably the best way moving forward. And how we can do this at a household level would be absolutely amazing.
Got it. Ulava and Teresa, do you want to add to that, or?
Okay, I was going to add to the desalination conversation there, because that came up in my conversation with a couple of stakeholders, even considering, so would they consider, solar powered desalination plants, right? And really they shared that is literally a last resort for Jamaica, right? Because it's so expensive, so costly. And what they would really want to focus on are other alternatives before investing, in the advancement of desalination technology. Other options, such as what you had mentioned about, wastewater recycling. That was a top priority for some of our stakeholders here in Jamaica. And of course, investing in nature-based solutions, right? Conserving and protecting our forests, our watersheds, all of that. So just to complement what was mentioned.
Great. I just want to make sure, Ulava or Alvin, did you want to add anything to that? I'm saving Rihanna for last because I've got a special question for her.
Yes, Aaron. Just want to add something that was said by Ruth. I think she did a brilliant job. So I would like to add that the question about Pacific Island is that we need a solution that is applicable, or that will be useful in a shorter range of time. For example, we are not looking at something that comes after 100 years, or that is beneficial to us after, let's say, 20 years. It's an urgent need. We want solution that is practical, that is applicable to the current scenario. And for that reason, we are working with multiple partners. As a research scientist myself, I'm currently working on developing a Pacific Island dashboard for monitoring and for evaluating the impacts of climate change. Also, we are working with different partners, for example, Australian aid, US aid, New Zealand aid, Japan aid. So these are some of the partners which we are working on and developing solutions that we can use straightforward and that is helpful in a shorter run. So that is something that we are working on. Thank you.
Great. Ulva, I didn't know if you wanted to add to that. Yep, she's trying. There we go.
Yeah. Just a minor comment on the recycling of the water, of the wastewater. Without knowing the techniques or the specifics behind, I know that in the Faroes, the salmon industry partners are doing that, and they are actually reusing, I think it's around 99% of the water that they're using. So it is definitely possible without knowing the specifics behind.
Oh, really interesting. Okay. I know we're running out of time, but Rihanna, there was a question here that I wanted to save for you. How do we encourage the youth to engage? What is it that excites you, and what will bring more youth to the table in these conversations?
The thing is, I don't think the youth need that much encouragement. So far, just putting out just the call for youth to come and participate. We've had thousands of youth showing their interest. What has actually been the limitation and boundary for youth engagement is actually the avenue in which youth can engage with their decision makers, because youth want to have a voice, they want to have a seat at the table, and they want to not be just a tick a box person in the room. But it's all about kind of the older generation actually welcoming youth to the table and taking them not just seriously, but having them as partners in their processes. So it is about formalizing these avenues for youth to be engaged, but also allocating budget for them to be there. Because if they're not there, they cannot really speak. And there's never funding for youth to be in these places. And there's never funding for youth to actually support their projects that they're doing. So far, we've actually, through another project, Youth for Water and Climate, we've been funding youth projects, small seed funding for projects, and we have seen immense impact beyond what we expected in terms of their leadership potential and the domino effect of youth taking a lead in their communities. So they are there, they're ready to do the work. It's just they need a little push and help to kind of continue forward. So this is what the Academy would like to do. So we connect the youth with mentors and persons in the decision-making space. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Maybe we just need to flip this whole thing on its head and have a Youth Water Congress and have the rest of us come to attend that.
So there will be one at the UN conference. There is a youth conference.
Yeah, but they put it in a separate place. When are we going to make that the main focus and the rest of us have to go there? Really good comments, though. Thank all of you. I'm not going to try to summarize the conversation. It's clear. Look, these are incredibly diverse and complex hydrometeorological environments and clearly beautiful. We've seen the pictures and worth a lot of attention in our focus next week. I hope we can all come together next week as we talk about these issues within the UN, put some of these ideas out there on the table and see if we can build up, global commitment to address some of these challenges in these island communities. I think that would be a laudable goal for us to all work towards. James, I did want to ask you a question. If you, a Christian, can answer it. There were a number of requests for the presentations. Is there any way that we'll be able to make some of this available to folks who've listened in today?
Yes, we will send it over email afterwards.
Okay, great. So for everyone, there'll be a follow-up email that'll include links to the presentations. So you should all get access to it. thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you, Christian, to hopefully people can stay with us for a few minutes to engage in an informal conversation. But Christian, you've got all the details.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for moderating the panel, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for participating on the session today. We do have a networking session, and the links, you will see them on the chat, and also here, let me just quickly share my screen so you can also see those. Just 1 second. Okay, so if you have your phone with you, you can scan this QR code, or you can go directly to this link that you see here and also in the chat. This session will be held on Remo, which is a separate platform. You don't need to register. You can join using your Google account, your LinkedIn account, Facebook account, and other options are available also for people with Apple accounts can also join us there. We will be starting right away, so hope to see you all there if you can. Thank you so much, and remember that the recording and other materials will be sent over email to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
for
Thank you
attending
to
today.
all of our panelists and speakers for a wonderful conversation today. Thank you for the great questions online as well. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aaron.